Welcome to Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. We're going to finish up Joshua today. From Joshua, we learned some leadership principles. One principle is just, if you want to be a better leader, you read about good leaders. You look at the example of a good leader. And we're doing that with Joshua, the Old Testament leader. Then another principle of leadership is mentoring someone to be your successor. John Maxwell says there is no success without a successor. And Moses was successful in that he brought Joshua along. We see some good leadership examples and principles in the book of Joshua. But we want to look at the book, just give an overview of it today in 2 lectures. And again, emphasize the theme, God keeps his promises. Joshua is part of historical books, and these are divided up into 3 different areas or kinds of historic books. You have the theocratic books, that is where God is ruling, in Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. This is when the land is occupied. There's no king yet. These books transition from Deuteronomy to the occupation of the land. Then the second area is monarchical books, or where there is a monarch that God has appointed, through whom God is ruling. That's in the books of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. This is a transition from judges to kings, to the decline of the nation, to captivity. And Israel's out of the land. They've been taken captive. Then you have the restoration books in Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, where Israel returns back to the land. And in Joshua, we see God keeping his promise and conquering the land in chapters 1 to 12. It's good to think about this in 2 ways. The provision of the land of Canaan, the promised land, was unconditional. God promised it to Abraham in many, many places. Genesis 12, 15, 17, even giving the borders of the land. But the possession of the land, or the blessings of the covenant, are conditional. We go back to Joshua 1 in verse 1. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant is dead. Therefore arise, go over this Jordan into the promised land, you and all the people and all this people of Israel, unto the land which I do give to them, which even to the children of Israel, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, I have given unto you, as I said. But you got to go over. You got to cross Jordan. You got to step this property off. The provision was unconditional. The possession, the blessing, was conditional. Most of God's promises are conditional, as we have been saying. If we confess our sins, God is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. And so we see this example in the Old Testament. Here is Joshua's war strategy as we see it in the book of Joshua. I'll just jump ahead here and then come back to that. God keeps his promise in conquering the land in chapters 1 to 12. The idea is divide and conquer the 31 kings mentioned in Joshua 12:24. There's a central campaign. There is a southern campaign, and then there is a northern campaign. Let's go back and look at this map. Here's the central campaign, divide and conquer. This is when they cross Jordan and they defeat the major fortress there, Jericho. Then they turn south. and they defeat the southern kings. And then they go north and defeat the northern kings. That's the strategy, divide and conquer. The central campaign is in chapters 1 to 8. You have three miracles in Joshua. And the first of these three is the stopping of the Jordan River in chapter 3. When Joshua and Israel go across, it's again you see Joshua reflecting Moses, his mentor. Moses led Israel through the Red Sea. Joshua led Israel through the Jordan River. There's the first of three miracles in Joshua. The second miracle is in Joshua 6, and this is the victory over Jericho, which is then defeated, followed by the defeat of Ai. Ai is really the first blunder that Joshua the leader makes. He's just defeated the mighty Jericho and really doesn't, sort of presumes he's going to defeat Ai. That should be a caution to us. Sometimes if we have a great victory in our life, a great win in our life, we sort of relax and we're not prepared spiritually maybe for the next battle that comes into our life. Then there is the miracle of the stopping of the sun in Joshua chapter 10. This is into the next campaign, the southern campaign. But I wanted to highlight these three miracles. There's three periods of miracles in the Bible. You have Moses and Joshua, and then later you have Elijah, Elisha, and then when we move into the New Testament, you have Christ and the apostles. There are periods, long periods of time between these three periods of miracles where there are no miracles. And by that we mean sign miracles. God was always doing the supernatural. God can do the supernatural through miracles, or he can do the supernatural through providence or through circumstances. God is not mentioned in the book of Esther, but God is supernaturally working behind the scenes to protect his people in Persia. But sign miracles are limited to these three periods: Moses and Joshua. Moses parted the Red Sea, was used by God to part the Red Sea. Joshua, we just saw these three miracles in the life of Joshua. Moses also saw the manna falling down from heaven, striking a rock and water coming out. These were sign miracles. In Exodus chapter 4, God told Moses, "Lead my people out of Egypt." Moses said, "They won't follow me." God gave him right there on the spot. He said, "Throw your rod down." He threw it down, picked it up. It turned into a serpent. He said, "Put your hand in your shirt, pull it out." It was leprous. He said, "Put your hand in your shirt, pull it out." It was healed. That was a sign miracle. And then he turned the Nile River into blood. These were sign miracles. That is, authenticating Moses as the leader. Joshua did the same. These sign miracles authenticated him as the leader in a time of unbelief. Same is true with Elijah, Elisha, Christ, and the apostles. Those sign miracles authenticated Christ as the Messiah and the apostles as the followers of Christ. We're in that age in between miracles, in the tribulation period when God begins to deal with Israel again. Remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians? The Jews require a sign because of their unbelief. But in the tribulation period, God's going to be dealing with Israel again, and these sign miracles are going to happen again. But this is a time of sign miracles in the book of Joshua. We see three there. Then you have the victory in the southern campaign. That's where they go south. You have Joshua's second blunder with the Gibeonites, where he does not really check them out, and he associates with the Canaanites. But then right after that, you have his success in stopping the sun in Joshua chapter 10. Look why the author is amazed at this miracle. There's all kinds of opinions on what happened. We know the sun does not rotate. It's possible that God just protracted the sun giving out light so he could extend the daylight so Joshua could defeat his enemy. But look what amazed the author in Joshua 10 verse 14. And there was no day like that before or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man. Well, what amazed the author? Not the fact that Joshua had more sunlight, but that God responded to a man. God had taken the initiative in the previous two miracles, the stopping of the Jordan River and the defeat of Jericho. Joshua took the initiative in this miracle, the miracle of the stopping of the sun. And that's in layman's terms, that's the language of appearance. It appeared that the sun did not set. That's layman's languages. It's layman's language. But nevertheless, it's the description of a miracle. Joshua took the initiative in this miracle, and that's what amazed this author of Joshua. And then the Northern Campaign is in those chapters. There's a victory. The victory is summarized and reviewed. Chapter 11 and verse 16. You see the summary of the nations that were defeated. You have a summary of the kings that were defeated in chapter 12, 7 to verse 24. You go to verse 24. Here's the end of that section. The kings, all the kings 30 and 1. God gave Joshua and Israel, this ragtag bunch of amateurs, the ability to defeat these veteran soldiers, because this was God's promise. It wasn't based on their ability. It was based on their willingness to obey God's commands and exercise faith in him. Joshua has successfully removed most of the significant kings and threats. Now the individual nations are to conquer what is in their allotted land. Look in chapter 13, verse 1. Now Joshua was old and stricken in years, and the Lord said unto him, You are old and stricken in years, and there remains yet very much land to possess. But we know that those tribes did not conquer the designated land. That sort of helps us transition into the allotment of the land. If we look in chapter 15, verse 63. As for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem unto this day. But God promised them, you will possess the land. And God gave them ability to defeat 31 kings. And he would have given them the ability to be a complete success, but they failed to obey. What we're going to look at next is God keeping his promise in dividing the land to the 12 tribes. So I'm going to come back and give the next lecture on this second division in the book of Joshua.